Number 10. The Devil Made Me Do It. In 1981, 19-year-old Arne Cheyenne Johnson sparked controversy far and wide for a crime he wasn't behind, or so we think. While arguing with Alan Bono over Johnson's girlfriend, Arne stabbed Bono, resulting in the man's death. When police arrived, Arne claimed that the devil made him do it. When the words "the devil made me do it" came from his mouth, it sent the world into controversy. Apparently, Arne was possessed by a demon that had not been vanquished by the Warrens at all. Ed and Lorraine had worked with his family a year prior when Arne's girlfriend's brother David was possessed by not one, not two, but 43 demons. In order to save him, Arne commanded the demons to enter him instead, so when his dark deed finally occurred, Ed and Lorraine flew to his defense. The Warrens stated that at the time of the exorcism, and I quote, "Johnson leapt up and cried to the demon, 'Come into me, I'll fight you, come into me.' But from that time on, he was possessed." The Paranormal Society was split in half, but Johnson's team was committed. The court had defended acts of God in the past, like a lightning strike to a tree hits a car, you know what I mean? And now it was time to defend accounts of the devil. But despite what you believe, it wasn't enough, and Johnson received a maximum sentence but was released after good behavior just 4 years later. But still, the fact that these demons were never truly vanquished left the Warrens terrified that this might be the case elsewhere. Number 9. The SMURL haunting. Jack and Janet Smurl sound like they should be like the leading couple of a comedy featuring Jennifer Aniston and Jason Sudeikis. But of course, wrong list. The plight of the couple attracted the attention of Ed and Lorraine Warren after a series of dark and ominous events struck, of course. In the 1970s, the family started experiencing shocking technical mishaps like their TV bursting into flames and toilets flushing by themselves. I know, do ghosts poop? Apparently. At first, they didn't think anything of it, but then the knocking started, in a peculiar pattern of 3 followed by terrible sudden odors, making the Smurls feel ill. The strange noises and smells were swiftly followed by sightings, and thus entered the Warrens. The Warrens discovered a presence of 3 separate demons, and despite 3 exorcisms, the family reported the return of the demons until finally they let go 15 years later. Number 8. The haunting in Connecticut. The mortuary turned home for the Snedeker family in Southington, Connecticut definitely created the perfect breeding grounds for a scary story, one that left even the Warrens uneasy in their skin. First off, moving into a mortuary? No thank you. In the 1980s, the Warrens took on the case of Carmen and Al Snedeker, who were being tormented by a series of restless spirits and demons. So in this case, it's not just one, but many that they feared. The family reported the smell of rotted flesh lingering in the house because, I don't know, it was a mortuary, and that the taps would turn red out of nowhere. The eldest son was plagued by visions of ghosts, and both Carmen and Al reported being sodomized by the ghosts. It's a very specific activity. Which led to the Warrens making the discovery that whoever the morticians were, their activities were not always professional, if you get my drift. I don't know what's worse, the demons themselves or like the people who used to live there. Ugh, can't handle that. This was one of their most confusing cases and remains under scrutiny to this day, but the Warrens knew whatever it was had to be exorcised. But the question is, was it really, or is it just hiding out until someone else comes along? Number 7. The Enfield haunting. I don't know what it is with the 70s, man. It just seems like so much weird stuff happened. We had serial killers. It's nuts. But it just seems like it's one of the strangest times in history, what with violent killers and violent hauntings. The Enfield haunting took place in Brimstown, England, and remains one of the more boggling cases the Warrens worked on. Peggy Hodgson and her family claimed to have seen furniture and toys being thrown and moved by unknown forces in their homes. They even claimed that violent voices were heard and that their children were levitating in the air. They caught the photo of the girls levitating when the investigators set up a wired control camera into the room, which periodically caught images throughout the night. Whatever it was, the Warrens knew there was a demonic entity within the house and immediately set to work. Number 6. The PERRON family case. The PERRON family lived in the old Arnold estate, which inspired the scariest film I have ever seen personally, because if you've watched me on Central Dark, you know how low my tolerance is. But anyway, it's still awful. Yeah, you know it, you've heard of it. 8 generations of families lived and died in the old house and apparently never wanted to leave, or never could. When the Perron family moved in the 1970s, the advice they got was to leave the lights on always. Why didn't you leave then? I don't know. I don't know how that didn't send them running for the hills. The house had been rife with tragedy, but one of the 3 people who took their own lives was an alleged Satanist whose activity was responsible for the possession of the house. Her name was Bathsheba Sherman, who became a demon that Loraine will never forget. The demon would physically attack the daughters of the Perron family, with one reportedly seeing a floating head screaming and retching at her. Ugh, I almost didn't say her name, but I did, so we'll see what happens to me now. Number 5, the Shadow Doll. The Shadow Doll is literally the doll of your nightmares. The Shadow Doll comes from unknown origins but was kept in the Warrens Museum for safekeeping. But what we do know was that it was used for satanic rituals, and that the thing is doused in black magic and contains human and animal bones. Whatever possesses this thing had the Warrens take it into their possession to ensure that it caused harm to no one else. Legend has it that if you take a picture of the doll, it will possess your nightmares. But it won't just be any nightmare. It will be the most terrifying you've ever experienced, and some have even suffered heart attacks from them. I know what you're thinking. Why didn't they just burn the thing? Well, what's more dangerous? A demon you can see right in front of you, or one free to wander wherever it chooses? Honestly, I take the spider approach with this. If you see the spider, you know where the spider is, you're good. As soon as the spider disappears, burn your house down. Number 4, Valak. This one is a little controversial because was it just made up for the films? We don't know. Valak is a real demon mentioned in the Lesser Key of Solomon that was introduced into the Conjuring series of films. Though her direct involvement with Lorraine and Ed is under debate, Lorraine's belief in the demon was very strong. Valak is referred to as the Great President of Hell, and usually chooses to appear as a small winged, 2-headed creature thing resembling a child. Valak is said to command 30 legions of demons, and in the film became the leading arch nemesis of the Warrens. We'll mention BORLEY Church in a second, but Valak was portrayed as a nun. But there is some speculation that says that they may have actually encountered him throughout some of their worst cases. Lorraine often said that she encountered a black, shadowy vision of a dark entity whenever she wasn't working on a case, and believed that she was being followed by something she couldn't explain. Want to know more? Stay tuned until the end of the video and make sure to like and subscribe while we're here. Number 3, BORLEY Church relates to Valak. We'll talk about this in a second. The grim history of BORLEY Church is the perfect setting for a horror film. The land upon which it is built used to be the home to a 14th century monastery, where a monk fell in love with a nun at a nearby convent, which led to the monk being hanged, and the nun was bricked up alive within the walls of her convent, which sounds pretty friggin' extreme if you ask me. It sounds like evil resided there long before Ed and Lorraine made the trek out to sort out whatever demon lay between its walls. Whoever did that to those 2 poor people, ooh, that's awful. This case inspired the famous nun apparition, as I mentioned, as the youngest daughter of the family who settled there reported seeing her figure. She was also pushed and slapped hard enough to leave welts behind, and that was just in the 1800s. When Ed and Lorraine visited, they obtained photo evidence of the hauntings. Ed captured the image of a monk leafing through one of the books at the altar, and Lorraine experienced a black entity rush past her. Valak. She remembered feeling an overwhelming sense of evil. A picture revealed later showed that the shadow of a nun was rushing past her, so that's where the image came from. So was it Valak? We don't know. Number 2, the Annabelle doll. You knew. Probably the most famous of the hauntings conquered by the Warrens was the Annabelle doll. It would almost be a crime not to mention it. Dolls are already eerie with their black, piercing, beady eyes that look like there's nothing there. But in this case, the most terrifying part was the thing behind it. The case dates back to the 1970s when a Raggedy Ann doll was innocently purchased from an antique store for her daughter. Soon the doll began raising alarm when it would change positions in the house, boggling its owners. But when the notes started showing up saying help me and help Lou, then they came home to find it covered in blood, and they decided then that they needed to call a professional. The first medium they called in said it was just the spirit of a girl who passed away, but then the owner, Angie's boyfriend, was attacked. Enter the Warrens. They knew the doll was in fact a demon based on the marks of the beast and other encounters. They removed the doll and took it home, vowing not to take the highway, concerned that whatever was within the doll might cause an accident. Indeed, their brakes stalled or failed several times on their way home, putting their life in jeopardy several times. It wasn't until Ed doused the doll in holy water that the problem desisted. The couple was so concerned about the doll that Ed routinely said a prayer over the doll every single night. Alright, number 1, the Amityville horror case. The setting: Amityville, Long Island in 1975. A place rife with satanic manifestations set on driving whoever entered to violent madness. As soon as I even say Amityville, you know where this is going. One of the most famous Warren cases, this haunting continues to land on the conclusion that there are just some things that can't be explained. A year before the Lutzes moved into the suburban home in Long Island, Ronald DeFay Jr. shot and killed the 6 members of his family. So it's no wonder that during the first month of living there, the Lutzes experienced swarms of flies, loud banging noises, disturbing entities, and even levitations. The Lutzes moved out and left all their belongings behind, and George Lutz, the father, an ex-Marine and karate expert, so clearly a tough guy, wouldn't even meet the Warrens at the house. He met them at a Pizza Hut. He was that scared. The Warrens said that this case affected their personal relationship to each other the most out of any case they've worked on. This entity followed the Warrens home the very first day, and Lorraine described being incredibly fearful. There was something she just couldn't explain. To this day, Lorraine says that this is the case that haunts her the most, and said, and I quote, she hoped that this was as close to hell as she would ever get.
Starting off this countdown, we have Maurice. Now, if you've seen The Nun, then you already know a bit about Maurice, or Frenchie. This guy was a hard-working farmer that ended up getting diabolically possessed. This occurred in 1985. Sometimes blood would randomly just pour out from his body from like his nose, eyes, and mouth. And he didn't know what was causing it. And then he developed super strength and also could randomly understand and speak Latin. At first, he went to a police officer for help, and then a priest, and then finally Ed and Lorraine Warren agreed to help him. Now, he apparently went through a number of exorcisms. According to the Warrens, during the exorcisms, Frenchie's head would split open, boils would appear on his skin, and crosses appeared all over his body. In fact, they have it all on film. Take a look.
Let's step to the front. Feet up in the shoulder? Yeah. Move, yeah, you're in the way, right? Yeah. Okay.
It literally looks like somebody took something sharp and carved it into him and then it scarred up. But those would appear all over his body. Like the Warren said, Frenchie would often get random cuts on his forehead and scalp. They would split open and bleed during the exorcisms.
How did you enter, Marty?
That is absolutely horrifying. The demon inside of Frenchie put up a huge fight against the Warrens. It certainly made their job more difficult, but also horrifying. In our 9th spot today, we have the childhood demons. Ed Warren's first encounter with the paranormal happened when he was only 5. He claimed that he would see an apparition of a woman. It started off as a dot of light that then transformed into a semi-transparent woman, and then she vanished right in front of his eyes. That encounter at 5 years old must have been absolutely terrifying. After that, Ed would often see his dead relatives that he's never even met before. In fact, one of his deceased aunts told him that when he grows up, he would help many priests, but never become a priest himself. Which was very true. It was like a little prediction of his future. Although his relatives obviously weren't out to get him, Ed still encountered a number of scary entities and demons when he was only just a kid. Which obviously he feared for, obvious reasons. That's terrifying. In our 8th spot today, we have the Military Academy demons. Back in the 1970s, the Warrens were sent to a military academy in West Point, New York to investigate some paranormal activity. Cadets would complain about feeling watched by an unseen force while they were sleeping. Others saw ghostly apparitions in the middle of the night. One of the scariest encounters was in October of 1972. It was 2 in the morning when a ghost soldier manifested right in front of 2 cadets. Apparently, this demon soldier had menacing eyes that glowed. When the cadets looked into his eyes, they both fell unconscious. When Lorraine Warren investigated West Point, they found that it was haunted by a number of spirits. One was an Irish cook named Molly. She would just be a little nuisance, but she wasn't evil. Same with another ghost whose name was Greer. He was a soldier turned murderer. He would haunt this place because of his guilt. Now, the evil ghost or demon was given the name the Pusher. He could literally cause someone's entire body to freeze or make them pass out, like I said before. I believe now that that demon is gone, but some of the more harmless ones still haunt that area. In our 7th spot, we have the Donovans. In the 70s, the Donovan family was being haunted by some malevolent demon. It started off with them just hearing loud noises coming from inside their walls, like banging. Eventually, things would happen, like blood would pour out from their taps, and they would hear animalistic growls coming from within their house. The Warrens witnessed this all. Turns out that the daughter, Patty Donovan, used an Ouija board and was communicating with a spirit that claimed it was a young boy. But in fact, it was a demon in disguise as a young boy. After learning about this, the Warrens called for a priest and they exorcised the house from evil. In our 6th spot today, we have the Antonelli's. It all started back in February of 1966 when the Antonelli family started experiencing some paranormal visitors. Miss Antonelli was the first to see it. She was about to doze off when she got a feeling that someone was in the room with her. She opened her eyes and saw a mass of gray mist with 4 distinct appendages. She turned on the lights and the figure disappeared. For years, this figure tormented her and only her. Then, it started tormenting her husband. One time, a hammer flew down the stairs right towards him. Thankfully, it didn't strike him. But that's when the Warrens were called in. They conducted a seance and found some pretty dark stuff went down in that house. Like, a girl became impregnated by the neighbor, her baby was then and buried in the cellar, etc., etc. The house was just incredibly evil and infested with entities and demons. We're now at our 5th and halfway mark with the Southend werewolf. Probably one of the more bizarre cases ever investigated by the Warrens. Basically, a man named William Ramsey claimed to be possessed by a demon that manifested itself in the form of a werewolf. So then Ramsey started to do werewolf-type things. He said his first werewolf transformation happened when he was about 9. He was playing outside when all of a sudden he got a whiff of something awful, and then his whole body turned ice cold. He then went into a fit of rage. He even managed to rip a complete fence out of the ground, like post and everything. I mean, having that much power as a 9-year-old makes no sense. But it was the demon inside of him controlling him. Things like this continued to happen as he aged. One second he'd be normal, the next he'd be controlled by that demon and go into that fit of rage. During these fits, he always displayed inhuman strength. In fact, he would also growl like a werewolf and snarl like one too. In 1989, the Warrens were assigned to this case and helped conduct an exorcise on him. I don't even know if they got the demons out of him, to be honest. In our 4th spot today, we have the Buddhist exorcism. What you just saw is real footage of the Warrens conducting an exorcism in Japan. So in the early 2000s, the Warrens took a trip to Japan to check out these haunted tunnels that a number of people have died in and were supposedly haunted. But while they were there, they were contacted to perform a Buddhist exorcism on a woman named Teresa. In this clip I'm about to show you, Loraine is trying to reach out to Teresa and get her to fight back against the demon possessing her.
You hear me? Teresa, you hear me? You understand me? Leave, dear, leave. I'm here to help you.
The footage is very creepy. Not only is it actual footage of someone that is possessed, but you can also hear the demon in her voice reaching out to talk to Loraine. Now this case is more on the low-key side. Like, I tried to Google more about it, but there isn't much out there. We actually don't know if they successfully exorcised the demon out of her. Now here's the thing. After this trip to Japan, Ed got really sick and his health started to decline. It's thought that maybe the demon that was haunting this girl had something to do with this. Maybe it latched onto Ed as well. Coming in at number 3, we have the vampire. So I just finished talking about the werewolf man, and now may I present to you the vampire girl. Sounds like Twilight. Whose team were you on? Team Edward or Team Jacob? Let me know in the comments below. I'm sorry, I was always on Team Jacob, okay? Anyways, the Warrens had to deal with one case where an 18-year-old girl was possessed by a demon with vampire tendencies. It started when the girl gained interest in the occult and death. She then began practicing satanic rituals, and what do you know? She got possessed. Soon, she found herself waiting in cemeteries or dark places trying to lure men in, and then when they got tricked by her, she would bite them and taste their blood like a vampire. Turns out she did this to around 16 people. She was a literal vampire because of this demon in her. Moving on to number 2, we have Beelzebub. You heard me correctly. Lorraine Warren and her son-in-law Tony Spira were called onto a case in which a man was possessed by Beelzebub. In Christian texts, the name Beelzebub is often associated with the devil himself. They would alternate between using this name and Satan. He's considered one of the 7 princes of hell, and he is associated with the sin of gluttony. In other texts, he is described as the lieutenant of hell, second in power only to Satan, which is terrifying. Again, they have video evidence of this possession. Take a look.
Okay. You hear me? Jesus Christ has all the power. You have none. What is your name? Jesus Christ commands you to answer that question.
What is your
What
name?
is your name?
Dude, I'm sorry. If I was there, I would have peed my pants. That is horrifying. But that's not all. There were at least 4 other demons inside of this man possessing him. They then asked the demons why they were possessing Roberto, and he replied with power. Like, literally, it's terrifying. That's how he said it. That was a really good impression.
Why are you in Roberto? Why are you there with Roberto? Jesus Christ doesn't like demonic spirits within a human spirit.
I don't know about you, but that creeps me out, okay? It's terrifying. And in our number 1 spot today, we have the deal with the devil. For this next case, the Warrens had to deal with the devil himself. It all started when a 19-year-old girl named Leslie from New York made a deal with the devil. Turns out she had a really big crush on a boy and wanted some help winning his heart over. So what does she do? She doesn't go to a love guru, no! She decides to call on the devil and make a deal with him. She offered him her soul if the devil gave her the boy she had a crush on. The deal worked. She got the boy, but the devil got her. So the Warrens literally had to step in and save her from the freaking devil. Like, that's some scary bad there, I'm sorry.
Starting us off at number 10 is Nosferatu. That creature was utterly terrifying, and beyond the movie, I don't need to see him ever again. Ever. This one comes from Reddit user D-Day Dodger, who shared that when they were 10 years old, their family lived in a farmhouse in this rural area. Their bedroom was actually their parents' walk-in closet, and their bed was on the floor. That would have been very annoying for the parents. Like, what if they wanted to, get down to it, and their little kid was just in the walk-in closet, like, give us some privacy. Either way, one night as the user was sleeping, something awoke them in the middle of the night, and when they opened their eyes, they were horrified. There was this black humanoid figure crouching next to the bed with its face not even a foot away from the user's face. Eyes wide open, the demon was just staring at the user as it started moving closer. Instead of screaming, the user just hid under the blankets, which is a great call for when it's night and you don't want the demons to get you. I used this tactic a billion times while I was growing up, and clearly I'm still here and fine, so it does work. Either way, the user fell asleep while feeling the demon thing breathe on them and woke up the next day alone in their room. All they said was that the demon looked a lot like Nosferatu, and that means I don't need to see this demon. Nope. Coming in at number 9 is Laura. Back in March of 2015, 22-year-old Laura from Argentina seemed inherently possessed by some demon or another. Her family were concerned, her friends were scared, and the options were getting slim. Bishop Manuel Osuna stepped in and performed an exorcism on her, and the process was grueling. You can see her writhing and banging her head on the ground in the video, and she's doing all that while being held down by 2 women. Bishop Manuel is part of the bishops at Lutheran Charismatic Church, and they all believe that the demon exists. exists. He's not an idea or a theory. He's not something abstract. He's something terrifying, a fallen angel. The devil is not a metaphor. The devil is something real that Jesus Christ faced. The devil looks for the perdition of the human being, and for this he will use any possible evil instrument. And by that, they just mean possessing humans, so they are definitely among us. They're probably all devils. At number 8, we have Lucifer. Back in 1997, Father Gabriel Amorth was confronted with a demon in the form of a young, lanky peasant man. Amorth founded the International Association of Exorcists back in 1994 and has a never-ending list of people who he's exorcised. He shared that some liberations take months and others can take years. Can you imagine being possessed for years? Like, you don't get that time back. What a betrayal. Either way, while the exorcism was going on, Amorth asked Jesus for help and the man started spitting and cursing at him in English even though he could only speak fluent Italian. The guy began to howl and scream and froth at the mouth and was seemingly ready to attack the priest. After more prayers and ritual recitations, he asked the demon what its name was and the man snarled back saying, "I am Lucifer." At this point, the guy's back was unnaturally arched and he was just screaming as his eyes rolled back. The room got so cold to the point ice crystals were forming on the walls and windows, and then the guy straight up started levitating. Say no more, I don't need to continue. Filling our number 7 slot is the Bible. Now I just want to preface this one with the fact I'm not Christian, so I have not read the Bible. I'm taking the information and interpretation of this from sources online, so if something's not completely correct, then I apologize for my ignorance. Just let you know. Olufemi Olusanmi shared on Quora that according to Ephesians 6:12, New King James Version, it says, "For we do not wrestle against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against the rulers of the darkness of this age, against spiritual hosts of wickedness in the heavenly places." Meaning it's simply not normal or human for people to kill, betray, and hurt others. Anytime a human does any of those despicable acts, it's actually a demon doing them. So technically, demons live among us in abundance. Serial killers seem to have happy relationships with their demons, others do not. Suffice it to say though, they are everywhere. Now at number 6 is Home Alone. This story was shared by an anonymous Quora user who said back in 2018, her husband went on a business trip for a night, so she was home alone with their 2 young sons. The wife put them to sleep and then got into bed herself at around 11 PM. For some reason, that night she couldn't fall asleep and kept waking up every hour or so with this feeling that her front door wasn't properly locked. At 3 AM, she got out of bed and checked the door, and true enough, it was locked and deadbolted. But I so relate to this. I always think my front door is unlocked even though I've checked it a billion times, but then I go check again because I have OCD, so there's that. Anyway, she went back to bed to find her kids awake a few minutes later. When the sun started rising, someone rang the doorbell and everyone thought the dad had come home early. As she reached the door with her kids, she kept getting this overwhelming feeling to not open the door. Her son goes to open it and she stops him before looking through the peephole and seeing an unknown man with his back to the door. When he turned around, the woman could see his thick black hair and no face. It was just a blank face. She gasped loud enough for the demon man to hear her that he started banging on the door, but she wouldn't open it. This went on for another 10 minutes before he finally left. No face, are you sure it wasn't a lucid dream? That is screwed up. Coming in at number 5 are Wendigos. I've done a 2-part series on Wendigos before, so check those out if you haven't watched them already, but this creature hails from the folklore of the First Nations Algonquin tribes in Canada and the US. Seen as evil spirits or demons, they can possess a human, making them do horrible things like murder, become cannibals, or become incredibly greedy and more. Their reputation is so bad within indigenous communities that Wendigo psychosis is a thing where people are so terrified of becoming a cannibal or Wendigo, but they're also simultaneously craving human flesh with a very high intensity. It's a very paradoxical situation. Between the late 1800s and 1920s, locals of a small town called Roseau in Minnesota reported sightings of the Wendigo. Every time anyone in town saw the demon, someone would unexpectedly die soon after. Not much is known about the sightings or why they occurred, but they eventually stopped, as did the deaths, and everything went back to normal. At number 4 is Julia. Now Julia's case is quite recent. It only happened in 2008, and I say that's recent even though that was 12 years ago, but it seemed like 2. Anyway, Dr. Richard Gallagher, a self-proclaimed man of science, became the go-to guy for exorcisms in the US. He saw it with his own eyes countless times, people suddenly speaking perfect Latin, sacred objects flying off shelves, a whole bunch. So one day he was called to help a woman dubbed Julia. She was a charming normal woman, but was also a high priestess of a satanic cult, and one day she went to a priest claiming she was being attacked by a demon. Objects would fly off shelves around her. She knew things about Richard there was no way she could have known, and even when he was on the phone to a priest, they both heard her demonic trance voices, which was impossible because she was thousands of miles away and nowhere near a phone whatsoever. Julia gained abilities that she didn't have before joining the cult, and anytime she went into a demonic trance, she'd have no recollection of what had gone on. They tried exorcising her, during which she started speaking in tongues, exhibiting superhuman strength, levitating, and changing the temperature of the room, and it ultimately failed. She refused to leave the cult or stop worshipping Satan, meaning the team couldn't do anything for her. Julia eventually got cancer and didn't want to die possessed, but Gallagher never heard from her again and presumed she was dead. Filling our number 3 slot is Amy STAMATIS. Back in November of 2006, Amy climbed into an open window of an apartment building in Arkansas and threw herself off of it, paralyzing herself from the waist down. When asked about the incident, she said she didn't jump but definitely fell. Amy had been having dark thoughts for months and started hearing voices telling her to kill herself. While in the hospital, she was visited by a woman who claimed she had raised the dead and that she could see demons inside of Amy. In the months leading up to the incident, weird things started happening to her. At the end of a 24-hour shift at the hospital, Amy fixed up a burned patient and then completely forgot how to do her job. She didn't even know where she was, and that was her last shift. Previously a marathon runner, she couldn't even run straight anymore, let alone pick her clothes out. Pentecostal evangelist Cindy Lawson met Amy and said she saw the demons surrounding her and compelling her to hurt herself and others. Now at number 2 is Gina. So back in 1990, Reverend James LaBar performed many exorcisms, one of which were on a Florida teen called Gina. Her exorcism was televised by the ABC network in 1991. Can we just, is that even humane? Gina was hospitalized for displaying psychotic behavior, and she went from that to tabloid fodder. Was she even capable of consent at this time? During the exorcism, which 29 million people tuned into, Gina is strapped to a chair while she barks at the priest and speaks in gibberish. She was possessed by demonic spirits. One was called Zion and the other Minga. The priest pressed a cross to her face saying, "You want pain, I'll give you pain," and then read the Roman Catholic rite of exorcism. After she was sent home, she was re-hospitalized and given antipsychotic drugs within a few days. A psychiatrist claimed the exorcism was a serious risk to her health and that she may just be delusional. Either way, I feel like something that puts you in that vulnerable of a space and at a time you don't have control over what you're doing should not be televised. That's just me though. And finally, at number 1 is Zurich. So this one was shared by Reddit user Hamish051, and he said that back in October of 2017, his band were on a European tour and was staying in a super old building in Zurich. Like, the building was built in 1260, it was old as shit. Anyway, the Airbnb was surprisingly super clean, and Hamish decided to sleep on his blow-up mattress. As the group was getting ready to go out in town, they saw a leaflet on the table telling them how old the building was, which was crazy to them. They honestly had no idea based on how well it had been renovated. Either way, the bandmates went out while Hamish stayed in and went to sleep. He woke up a while later at 3:30 AM due to the sound of a dripping tap. His bandmate had told him he was going to take a bath when he got back, so Hamish was pissed he was being so loud about it. He tried going back to sleep when he felt a large weight on the bottom left corner of his mattress, and it launched him into the air. He had an almost instant panic attack as ice shock went through his body. He felt a nudge and then another one. Hamish took off his blankets and saw the shape beyond the bed. It was this girl who was about 5'6" with hair down to her feet and no face. She was soaking wet and she had no face. He tried to scream but no sound was coming out, so he hid under the blankets and fell asleep terrified. He woke up to see one of his bandmates working at the table and another one, Gary, who was just waking up. He looked like a smacked ass, and so Hamish asked him if he had slept okay, and he said, "Mate, you would not believe me if I told you." Gary and Hamish had seen the exact same demon girl the night before.